We begin with some breaking news from Russia. At least 18 people have been killed and dozens injured in a blast at a college in Crimea. Officials say it wasn't a terror attack. Most of the victims were students at a technical college in the city of Kush. Over 200 soldiers have been deployed to the scene. Initial reports said the explosion was caused by a gas leak, but investigators later said an explosive device filled with metal objects had detonated in the dining area. They say the attacker was a 22-year-old student who shot himself after the blast. We'll bring you more on this story as we get it. The authorities in Guatemala have tried to disrupt a caravan of migrants heading towards the United States. The migrants from Honduras spent the night at shelters in Chicamula and the capital city after the Guatemalan police detained one of the supposed organizers of the caravan. Earlier, the police had blocked the path of some of the migrants. The caravan was organized as a protest of conditions in Honduras and against U.S. immigration policy.
It's going to be difficult, but however doesn't fight doesn't win anything. If we don't get to the US, well, we won't know what it's like until we get there. Let's see. We are calling on people for help.
We have received information that our colleague, Bartolo Fuentes, has been detained. He's accused of organizing the event. This is a lie. You can ask everyone here. He hasn't organized any event.
The president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, says the caravan was organized by the opposition to undermine his government.
The governments of Mexico, Guatemala and the United States have announced they will apply their immigration laws and further norms in line with their sovereignty. Hondurans should not get involved in this political game because it is inhumane. It is to be condemned. Today, the migrants are in danger. I cannot understand how somebody could use the misery of the people for political ends, risking their lives with children, with the elderly. This should not happen. This should not be allowed under the basic principles of human dignity.
About 1,000 migrants set off on Saturday, but the group later grew to 3,000. President Donald Trump threatened to cut off U.S. aid to Honduras if it didn't halt the caravan. Before he was detained, Bartolo Fuentes, a former member of the Honduran Congress for the Libre Party, blamed his government for the migrant situation.
In
Honduras, we have a corrupt government. Honduras should be sanctioned for condemning these migrants to misery, for keeping them in a country full of violence. The government of Honduras is corrupt. They have murdered people in the streets. It is a criminal government supported by Donald Trump. They have caused this migration. The sanctions are already there. People are already suffering them.
94 Venezuelan migrants living in Peru returned home thanks to the Return to the Homeland program. This is the 7th flight to depart from Lima.
This young Venezuelan mother worked for 3 months in a hotel in Chimbote in northern Peru, where she barely got paid for 14 hours of work per day. No free Sundays and no holidays. When she called for better conditions, she was fired.
We slept for 2 nights in a plaza with a little girl on the streets, and no one helped us. Nobody. Not even for her. And do you know what it's like to spend the night in the street? Horrible. The cold, the fear.
She's just one of the 94 Venezuelans who's taking the 7th flight back from Peru on the Return to the Homeland program. She wants to close this bitter period of her life when she was a victim of labor exploitation and of sexual harassment. The worst was when she tried to cross the border between Peru and Chile without her child's documents.
I was approached by a policeman. I told him my story because since I saw him in his uniform, I thought he seemed like a serious person. I told him what happened to me. And he told me that he would let me pass if I slept with him. I kept looking at him and talked to the supervisor, and he told me that I was crazy, that it was all a lie, and they didn't believe me.
Among those taking this flight are 7 pregnant women, 27 children, and 18 people with serious illnesses.
I was late for my rent payment by a week and I was evicted. I was kicked out without a penny. The guarantee I had paid, 400 soles. Where I had been the last days, living on the street.
What they all have in common is that they all decided to return to Venezuela. They once believed that Peru was the country of opportunities for all. And although they met many Peruvians who helped them along their way, the lack of employment, housing access, and access to basic services brought them to value the homeland they had left.
I'm returning due to the health situation of my son. I went out because of that situation. He suffers from a rare anemia, and I thought that here he could find some cure. He gets blood transfusions because he is dependent on it, and every transfusion here costs me $100.
So far, 8,410 Venezuelans have participated in the Return to the Homeland program. 658 of them returned from Peru, a country where there are more than 2,000 families registered waiting for their return to Venezuela.
Venezuela has announced that the US dollar will no longer be used as a reference for transactions in the domestic markets. The Minister of Industries and National Production, Tarek Al-Assami, said the transactions will now be referenced to the euro, yen, or any other convertible currency. This includes auctions under the Foreign Currency Exchange System, known as DCOM. The minister also announced that the country is set to open bank accounts in Asia and Europe to facilitate hard currency transactions.
We're going to begin, and we've already advanced with Asian and European countries, the opening of bank accounts that serve as banking correspondents and intermediaries for the operations that are beginning at this moment.
2 Peruvian journalists are being sued for defamation by an archbishop whom they accuse of taking part in sexual abuse cover-up. The journalists Paulo Ugaz and Pedro Salinas, both of whom investigated the abuses committed within the Sodiolithium of Christian Life, have been sued by the Archbishop of Peru. They have been issued a notice from the court and have to respond within 5 days. If found guilty, they could face up to 3 years in prison and a $30,000 fine.
This is a reprisal. This is vengeance from one of the members of the elite Catholic society against the 2 journalists that investigated and uncovered this Pandora's box.
Archbishop Eguren's attitude in terms of his peers in the church is contradictory and really striking, because doing this is clearly going against what Pope Francis has proposed.
We take a short break now and we'll have more news in a minute.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Federal police in Brazil are seeking to indict President Michel Temer on corruption. The police have requested that 11 others be investigated for money laundering. The authorities say there is enough evidence against the accused, including the president. Brazilian presidential candidate Fernando Haddad spoke to reporters about possible political alliances ahead of the runoff on October 28. He also touched on some of his plans if he wins the elections.
I've reached out to people I respect, independently of their political party. I've not invited anyone yet. I'm gauging options. I am speaking to highly respected people. I want to build the broadest government possible. Brazil needs that. But I've not given out any invites. But I'll keep reaching out to people. In contrast with Bolsonaro, we've decided to keep no one from outgoing President Michel Temer's economic team in our government. On January 1st, Temer's team leaves, and a new team will come in.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Limas, tells us about the gathering of leftist organizations in support of Haddad.
We are in front of the Unified Workers Central in Sao Paulo, where a gathering has taken place different left-wing organizations. This is an unprecedented gathering since the organizations have unanimously agreed to support presidential candidate Fernando Haddad. The Workers' Party candidate also rallied here and called on different organizations to dialogue with people to reach 10 million votes needed to win the election on October 28th. Social organizations also announced mobilizations in the coming days. On October 20th, another women demonstration will be held, and on the 24th, social movements will take to the streets.
Julian Assange's lawyers have expressed concern over restrictions imposed by the Ecuadorian government on the WikiLeaks founder. We have more in this report.
The Ecuadorian government has established new rules against Julian Assange, a refugee in the embassy in London. He has been there for 6 years and he now must undergo a change in protocol that will regulate his visits, medical attention and communication.
We are worried because this is a very strong and nefarious regime. He's being held like an inmate rather than a refugee, and there are restrictions to other rights that people with diplomatic asylum are entitled to.
This concern is shared by activists who have been following the case, especially that since March, access to internet and social networks have been denied to Assange for having allegedly expressed political opinions.
When you see the protocols and the leaked information, it seems that Assange was in a prison in which they're controlling visiting hours, motives, communication, and we're not protecting the person, but rather we're criminalizing them. And Moreno said it as if he was a hacker, a criminal.
Assange, defense lawyer in Ecuador Carlos Poveda, announced actions which will be taken along with the former Spanish judge Baltasar Garzón, who was visiting Ecuador, which will be directed at Minister José Valencia for having delivered information that was classified regarding Assange's case. According to the defense, it violates its rights.
Isolation is also the situation of the alleged declassification regarding the asylum. What worries us is the enforcement of a protocol that sets restrictions to visits, communications, and medical assistance.
In the document, Ecuadorian authorities urged the founder of WikiLeaks to see for the well-being, food, cleaning of his pets, and warned that if he does not take the measures, the diplomatic mission chief will ask him to hand over his cat to another person or a shelter. Measurements that are seen as mechanisms to pressure Assange on behalf of the Ecuadorian state.
The Senate in Uruguay has approved a proposal for the rights of transgender people. 17 out of 29 senators voted in favor of the bill, which now has to go to the lower house. The law aims to combat discrimination against the trans community by providing scholarships and job opportunities, as well as health and housing rights. But hormone treatments for minors without the authorization of an adult remains a polemical point.
This is a historic day. We are hopeful that the majority of lawmakers will vote for this law. The campaign to support this law is aimed at creating awareness that we need to guarantee the rights of the trans community. Even if the Constitution guarantees rights for all, we need this law to protect the trans community.
This is an important day because it is the final stage of something we have been fighting for. The National Council of Sexual Diversity, civil society, and several government offices are supporting this bill. We are hopeful that the bill will be approved, as we have seen the support of the people. We have received more than 60,000 signatures in the last month and a half in support of the law. This shows how important this is.
And before the vote had finished, our correspondent in Montevideo, Mateo Grie, sent this report.
The debate for proposed law on transsexual people has started in the Senate. This is the first step to pass the law. Trans people in Uruguay have been historically denied their rights. Reports show they have a life expectancy of 40 years and leave home before reaching 18. They do not have real access to the labor market. The trans community hasn't had law that protects them until now. The bill establishes that 1% of public posts are reserved for trans people. It also establishes scholarships to fight the early drop from education. The law also guarantees their protection once in the labor market and medical benefits that the state has to assure. The law has widely been supported by civil society. More than 60,000 signatures were collected before the law was proposed. If the law is approved in the Senate, it will go to the Chamber of Deputies. Social organizations are hopeful that the bill is passed before the end of the year.
Cuban diplomats condemned the U.S. blockade during a heated United Nations meeting on Tuesday. Shouting Cuba yes, blockade no, the diplomats say the United States is using the UN to launch a campaign against the island. The meeting was held by the UN Economic and Social Council under the demands of the United States. Cuban diplomats consider this to be a violation of the organization's rules and charter. They shouted and banged on their desks in protest.
Cuba condemns and rejects this new anti-Cuban action by the United States government. This constitutes an outrage for our sovereignty, and it does not respect our right to self-determination. This is not only an attack to our sovereign country, but also an attack to the principle of multilateralism and the UN basic norms.
Time for the second break of this newscast. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Canada has legalized the sale and use of recreational cannabis. People started queuing up in Newfoundland to win the title of the first legal buyer. Although selling cannabis is legal now, the provincial and municipal government will have to regulate it. After Uruguay, Canada is the second country to legalize recreational usage, but medical cannabis has been allowed since 2001. The United States Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has met the Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in Ankara to talk about the missing Saudi journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. Following his meeting with Saudi leaders, Pompeo came to Turkey to discuss the crisis and the further course of action. The U.S. diplomat was expected to bring information from Saudi authorities on the developments in the investigation. Turkish media published new allegations, citing that Khashoggi was dismembered by a Saudi assassin squad that could be linked to the Saudi Crown Prince. British Prime Minister Theresa May will be heading to Brussels for the European Council summit in a final bid to save her Brexit plan. Until May comes up with a new idea to resolve the concerns of EU members, analysts say the chances of getting the plan approved are low. The negotiations with the EU leaders have stalled over the issue of the Irish border.
Frictionless trade across our borders is exactly what lies at the heart of the free trade deal that is proposed in the government's plan put forward after the Chequers meeting in July. That's what we are working to deliver for people in this country. We want to deliver a Brexit that delivers on the vote of the British people and that ensures we protect jobs and security. And what would Labour deliver? They're havering around, they think free movement could still continue. That won't deliver on the vote of the British people. They now want a second referendum to go back to the British people and say, oh, we're terribly sorry, we think you got it wrong. There will be no second referendum. The people voted and this government will deliver on it.
A court in the UK has cancelled the jail sentence of 3 activists against the fracking industry. The Court of Appeal called their sentence excessive. The supporters of the activists said it is a huge victory for the climate justice movement and for the basic right to protest. They were jailed last month for their protest against a fracking site in Lancashire. An Afghan lawmaker contesting this week's parliamentary elections has been killed in a bomb attack. 3 other people were killed. The Taliban militant group has claimed responsibility. The attacker planted the bomb under Abdul Jamar Kashraman's seat. He was a member of parliament who was preparing for Saturday's election. He is the 10th candidate killed in the past 2 months. 2 candidates have been abducted and 4 others have been wounded by hardline Islamist militants. The Taliban has ordered Afghans to boycott the polls. But despite violent attacks and intimidations, female candidates have been preparing and campaigning hard for the upcoming elections. There are 417 women out of nearly 4,000 candidates for the 250-seat parliament. According to the Constitution, at least 68 of the seats in the lower house of parliament are reserved for women. In the violence-stricken Kandahar province, female politicians have it doubly hard. They must fight the patriarchy and the militants.
Kandahar is a conservative society, and women have traditionally played a very weak role in politics. But I can see now that people are changing, and they are thinking differently nowadays. I will try my best to represent these people, because these men who are standing with me today want me to be their voice and bring good to them.
And now let's take a look at the other stories making headlines around the world.
Hundreds of people have held a vigil in Malta demanding for justice for Maltese investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, murdered in October 2017. Marking the first anniversary of her death, supporters gathered in the capital Valletta to protest. Police have still not found who ordered her killing and is still offering a reward of $1.2 million for information on her case. Caruana Galizia was known for writing an anti-corruption blog. Thousands of people have been protesting against women entering one of the most important Hindu temples in the state of Kerala for the first time. The Indian Supreme Court outruled in September a law that barred women of menstruating age between 10 and 50 from entering and praying at the Ayyappa temple. Police were deployed to handle protesters who are trying to stop women accessing the site.
We have arrested almost 7 people till date. We have registered 3 cases. We have around 500-600 policemen spread around this area, including women police, and we are totally capable of meeting any eventualities. So we'll ensure that anybody who wants to go to the temple will go without any obstruction. No obstruction will be tolerated on any count.
Israel has launched air raids targeting the Gaza Strip allegedly after a rocket from the Palestinian territory hit an Israeli city. Israeli fighter jets struck about 20 targets, killing 1 Palestinian man and injuring 8 others. Israeli army said the attack was in response to a rocket hitting a house in Beersheba that caused no casualties.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talis Your English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you for watching.